Ladies and gentlemen, as the leader of Liberal Democratic Party of Iran, and of course as the whole nation of Iran today, we are mourning the death and destruction of so many thousands of our children. Just in the last month alone, in January, over 30,000 young, beautiful, hopeful Iranians were slaughtered by the terrorist regime in Iran. And of course, we know that we are at the brink of war, most probably a very destructive war. But as I was listening to President Bill Clinton and his comments and his concerns about the potential war, and claiming that American people deserve to be told the whole story straight, I am really wondering, is it ignorance or deliberate malice? Obviously, I cannot claim that the President of the United States and a knowledgeable lawyer like President Bill Clinton is ignorant. He has far more knowledge than most of us. So is he really cynical about what we are telling to the American people? But how did it all start? Let us go back 47 years. And I was there from very day one. In fact, when the revolution happened in Iran, I was in Washington, D.C., building National Association of Iranian Americans and trying my best at a very young age to inform the American people and President Carter that he was on a wrong track. I remember in early 1977, when President Carter arrived in the White House, he expressed a great deal of interest for violation of human rights in Iran. If we all go back to the history, it is very easy to recognize that in those years of 1977, there were savage human rights violations in more than 75 countries in the world, including China, North Korea, entire Africa, and many countries in Latin America and the rest of the world. So is it difficult to question the integrity of President Jimmy Carter to select among all these countries only one, a 37 years devoted American ally, a country that stood very strongly interconnected with the American economy, American politics, and a serious ally in the troubled region of West Asia? Why? Why Iran? And why such a virulent animosity with King Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was a devout nationalist and patriot? And in the words of President Carter himself, leader of the maintaining peace and security in a troubled region of Persian Gulf, we don't know. But that very sense of animosity towards royal government of Iran, under the, I would say, impression of concern for human rights, opened the door and encouraged the most violent, virulently sworn American enemies, alliance of the red and the black, alliance of the Islamist terrorism and communists, to start what they called the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And we are all witness the savagery that took place from day one. And did President Carter try to help? Did President Carter try to help the royal government to negotiate, to bring peace, to find solutions? No. His right hand, National Security Advisor Brzezinski, and his Foreign Secretary Cyrus Vance, they were all in the game and secretly undermining every effort of the royal government to prevent such a savage Islamic revolution that opened the door and opened the gate of Islamist terrorism for the entire region for 47 years and counting. The same regime that after taking over of the government and President Carter's military attaché or military advisor, General Heiser, was sent to Iran to urge and to pressure the Iranian military not to intervene, a military that could have the power to create a transitional government and prevent these sworn terrorists and the sworn American enemies come to power. Why? Unfortunately, these are the questions that have not been answered throughout the history. And President Bill Clinton claims that he wants to give it to the American people straight. Well, I seriously doubt his integrity. The savage regime take over the Iran's government, and the first step was to attack the American embassy and take 75 American diplomats as hostage in a brutal, parading them blindfolded in front of the cameras every single day. And the good old fake news American CNN covered it daily without telling the American people the true story behind the scene. This savage hostage holding took a year and a half, embarrassing and completely embarrassing the American people and undermining the American credibility in the entire region and the Arab world. And what did it get out of it? Finally, in January 20th, when the President Reagan was being sworn in on Capitol stairs, the hostages were released. What kind of a secret deal was there between US government and these terrorist savages? And this same regime, after creating the pretext to help the Shiite inside Iraq, and in fact encourage the Shiites to go against Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein attacked Iran in 1980. And that was the beginning of the 8 years horrific war that killed over 1 million people, innocent children on both sides. And this was, of course, a pretext to distract the nation of Iran, to consolidate the terrorist powers over the government apparatus. And what did we get in the end? After the hostage release and during the 8 years of President Reagan, sanctions after sanctions, isolated the nation of Iran, destroyed the nation of Iran's economy, without thinking what it did to the Iranian businessmen, Iranian students, and Iranian community in America and Europe and around the world. And president after president, 7 presidents so far. After President Reagan, President Bush, the father, came to power. And then the same Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And then we had the first war, 1991, in Persian Gulf. And it was the US unquestionable power that rescued Kuwait from the clutches of the Saddam Hussein barbaric regime. And yet, US military went all the way right to the borders of Iraq, liberating Kuwait, and stopped short right there. Why not go in and get rid of Saddam Hussein? We don't know. And the terrorist regime in Iran continued oppressing our people, savagely imprisoning thousands of protesters, slaughtering as many, looting our wealth, stealing our wealth and putting it in Swiss banks, murdering thousands, torturing, raping, and world over all these crimes, Europeans, Americans, the British, the French, the Germans continued to do business with this regime, trading billions, buying oil, selling oil, exporting goods, even technology. Much of the surveillance technology in Iran was provided by German Siemens. And then US called these 3 Europeans their allies. They opened the door for Russians to come in, for Chinese to come in and buy our oil at a fraction of a price in return for junk goods produced in China to go around the sanctions. Elections after election, the fake elections held by the terrorist regime to fool the people that there was actually an election. An election of who? Election of candidates handpicked, pre-approved. That it didn't matter which one people voted for, which one they elected as president or members of so-called parliament, Islamic Assembly, didn't make any difference. Corruption, oppression, repression, violence, savagery, unaccountable to the people, theft, rent, secret deals continue. I tell you to this day that the nation of Iran have no clue that in the last 47 years, how many million barrels of oil was produced, how many million barrels of oil was sold, at what price, to whom, and where the money went. No clue, because it's all controlled under the so-called supreme leader, who is a supreme leader without accountability to the people of Iran, only accountable to God, and he considers himself to be the representative of God on earth. And anyone who's against it, consequently you are against God and therefore you deserve to die. And they have murdered many. They have executed thousands of young, brilliant, beautiful Iranians who dared to question why. And then we had President Clinton in power. Billions of Iranian oil revenues were frozen in different accounts around the world. And the same President Clinton today who claims that in chess game you should have 5 moves ahead, you should think of 5 moves ahead, and you should have a strategy. They continued negotiating with this terrorist regime who have been trying to build a nuclear capability, nuclear bomb, only to become another North Korea and hold the entire nation of Iran hostage indefinitely because they have nuclear bomb. And then you wonder why. You wonder why President Clinton will open the door to release hundreds of billions of dollars of this frozen money to this sworn American enemy, holding the nation as hostage, blowing up American military headquarters in Beirut, in much of Syria and Iraq, plastering the whole country with American flag and death to America, forcing our 20 million children in the schools to chant death to America every morning, forcing the prayer sessions of Friday to chant death to America and death to Israel every Friday, to openly, worldwide, sending money and creating proxy terrorist groups and giving them bombs and training to attack American interests in the region and around the world, and dare to come or have the audacity to come far enough to all the way to Venezuela and Colombia and other countries in Latin America, right on the borders of US. And you release hundreds of billions of dollars to such a terrorist anti-American regime? And you call that policy? And you call that diplomacy? And you call that knowing 5 moves ahead in chess game? And now that President Trump, the most courageous president, the most patriotic president in the history of America, that in a matter of 1 year in his second term, he has brought the whole world who were the enemy of America to stand still and behave, arresting a drug dealer, a criminal like Maduro in Venezuela, and bringing Venezuela back to track. Hopefully soon getting rid of that pestering Cuba that have been a thorn in the back of the US for so many years. And of course, the most important, getting rid of the head of the snake of terrorism in Iran. And you believe that is the wrong move? And you consider yourself an American patriot and telling the American people the truth? I doubt it, Mr. Clinton. In fact, most of these unbelievable wrong policies were executed during the Democrats. You mentioned 2015 JCPOA, the long negotiated, dragged on policy of bringing the Iranian nuclear development under control, forcing Iranian terrorist regime to stop building proxy terrorist groups in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Yemen, all strategic points, all choke points, while secretly in bed with Russia providing drones and military help in their savage war against Ukraine, and selling their oil at fraction of a price to Chinese to receive surveillance cameras and all kinds of strategic assistance to oppress more and oppress better and more effectively our people. What on earth is happening to the Democratic Party in America? Are you not proud of American liberty? Are you not proud of American heritage? Are you not proud of Americans' international policy? President Clinton, you mentioned that if you have proper policy, then you will have Marshall Plan. You mentioned Marshall Plan as an example in Europe. Marshall Plan? May I remind you that Marshall Plan was only implemented or introduced after entire Germany was wiped out, after Hitler was defeated. And that is when you introduce Marshall Plan. You don't negotiate with Hitler. You did not negotiate with Hitler. Should have not negotiated with Hitler. Prime Minister Chamberlain negotiated with Hitler, and we saw what happened with Hitler. And was it not more wise to prevent Japanese before they attacked Pearl Harbor? Did we not know exactly that Japanese dictators are anti-American and building capabilities in order to attack America? Should we wait until they attack Pearl Harbor and then we wipe Japan? Should we wait for Iran to develop nuclear bomb and throw the nuclear bomb God knows where in the region or on American targets, and only then go in and wipe Iran out and kill millions and introduce Marshall Plan? Is it not better to do it now that they don't have nuclear bomb? And they are right now, as the so-called supreme leader is in a mouse hole hiding? So where is your chess game, knowing the 5 moves ahead, President Clinton? No. I hope and I pray that the bill will not pass in Congress to stop President Trump from military action against this savage regime. The demand on this savage regime is to end uranium enrichment, to end developing missiles over 300-kilometer limit, and stop supporting, actively funding proxy terrorist regimes in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Haqqa, in Gaza. And of course, at the end, graciously mentioning the nation of Iran, who deserve, the most pro-American nation in the world, to deserve to be free. Mr. Clinton, I am sure you saw the massive 1.5 million demonstrations in over 10 cities in Western cities, major Western capitals, including Los Angeles and Washington and New York, and Toronto, Melbourne, and London, and Munich. And 1.5 million Iranians coming in cold and unbelievable conditions to have such demonstrations and calling out for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to return, to restore our constitutional monarchy. And you know that 1.5 million in the streets represent minimum of 15 million real people in Iran who do not have the right to demonstrate, who do not have the freedom to demonstrate. And when they did just in January, they were slaughtered by thousands and thousands. They went into the hospitals to deliver this finishing shot at the head of the injured. They took the little girls in prison and raped them before they killing them. Are you going to negotiate with this type of savage people? Are you really willing to sit across the table and negotiate with such a murderous, sworn American enemy? Where's your pride, dear President Clinton? What happened to the American pride? What happened to the American commitment to the principle of liberty? You mentioned about the strategic development of American foreign policy that, for example, brought China to the table with President Nixon. May I remind you that did not happen without years of sanctions against China and closing your markets to China and creating 600 million Chinese having no jobs. That was the policy of playing the chess game with 5 games ahead. And you mentioned North Korea, that you had a negotiation with North Korea. Oh yes, we had a negotiation peacefully and gave us years. And what happened after years? They developed nuclear bomb. And a savage, murderous mafia government like Kim Jong-il have taken the entire North Korea as hostage because they have nuclear bomb. And they constantly threatening and blackmailing South Korea and Japan and even US interest in the region. Is that the right policy? You want to wait until this savage regime in Iran develops a nuclear bomb and then hold the entire nation of Iran as hostage and blackmail America and the regions and our neighbors in the region? Is that a right policy? No. No and no again, President Clinton. That is not the history of America that I know and love. There is no other solution. Sometimes you reach a point that it's proven that this savage regime is not a common sense people. You do not negotiate with a regime that opens military fire upon protesters in the streets and killing them by thousands. And this could not come to power, this regime could not come to power without the failure of President Carter's playing ability in a chess game. Could he not see what is happening? Could he not see? Was it not this very first regime in the very first year that they bombed American Marines in Beirut and killed 241 innocent young American Marines? Was it not this regime and the bloody Qasem Soleimani who were putting road bombs in Syria and Iraq and killing thousands of American soldiers? And who eliminated Qasem Soleimani? The brilliant President Trump. Not a democratic president who believes in negotiations. No, President Clinton. Negotiations cannot go on indefinitely when knowingly you know you're negotiating with an enemy. And if you have 4 demands of enrichment of nuclear uranium, enrichment of uranium, and proxy terrorist groups, and limiting the distance of the missile, ballistic missiles, why not get rid of the regime that will bring us all of the above and more? A popular crown prince is standing by to deliver Iran from this terrorist regime and be the leader of the provisional government. He has clearly stated that our policy is to bring about a national referendum to ask the nation of Iran, do they want monarchy or republican political system? I am 100% sure and certain that the masses of Iran will vote for restoration of monarchy. And that means pro-American policy, Mr. Clinton. Nation of Iran have been the most pro-American nation in the world, in the whole region. And after the national referendum, whichever political system the nation votes for, we will choose a commission to draft the constitution. We will draft a constitution that guarantees separation of church and state, separation of religion and state, individual liberties, free markets. And after approving that constitution, we will elect our parliament and start living a normal life. A life in peace and friendship with our neighbors. A life in peace and friendship with Europe and USA and the rest of the world. And start building an Iran, peaceful Persian Gulf, peaceful Middle East. And stop this nonsense of terrorism and anti-Americanism and anti-Israelis. The poor, starving Houthis in Yemen, they need economic help. They need proper leadership. They don't need terrorists. They don't need ballistic missiles to throw the missiles at merchant ships passing through. The poor people in Palestine need Israelis' help to develop a proper city and proper home for themselves. Not to have a devoted Israeli enemies under Hamas, that they spend all the money only to destroy Israel. How could we allow a government that have plastered the whole nation and put a countdown clocks in the capital of the day of destruction of Israel? 6, 8, 9 million people. These are maniacs. These are not leaders. These are not governments to be negotiated with, to sit across the table and talk to them. For heaven's sake, when common sense will come? It is now. It is now or never, Mr. Clinton. President Trump is 100% on right track. End this bloody regime now, by force. Yes, by force. There is no other solutions. The whole nation of Iran have been held hostage by the most savage, brutal, criminal thugs that we have seen on television, how they kill innocent people by machine guns. Am I in favor of war with my own people? No, Mr. Clinton. That is not what I'm asking. But our people are the ones who are inside the bank, held hostage by bank robbers. And what choice do we have but to ask SWAT team from outside to come in and destroy these bastards? That is not asking war with my people. Yes, in the process, maybe few of us get killed, but do we have other choice? Isn't 47 years enough waiting? Isn't 47 years enough negotiating? The time has come. And I pray today, tomorrow, this week, next week, President Trump have had it. And this regime must go. There is no alternative. The people of Iran will never, ever accept, in fact, a diplomacy or a diplomatic solution that ends up allowing this regime to stay in power. Absolutely not. The people of Iran have passed the point of no return and will under no circumstances allow this regime to stay in power. And we expect the American might to be behind justice and freedom. May God bless America and God bless Iran.